Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Welcome to another edition of Cal's Corner Radio here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff. I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Folks, as I say at the top of every show, so you can skip right through these next few seconds if you want to, the purpose of the show is we try to cover everything from politics to the paranormal. That's a lot of different subjects. While we literally don't cover all of that in one single episode, no one could live that long to do so, we try to give an overview of relevant, important stuff. So let's cut to the chase here and talk about everything from politics to the paranormal by summarizing some of the news that's going on, some of the major stories. And then what we will also do is cut to the paranormal and talk about that as well near the end of the show. All right, first of all, let's talk about hurricanes, because once again, you have a hurricane that has devastated lives. Again, it's in the Caribbean area on the east coast of the United States. You know, there are people I know, friends, who tell me, yeah, when I retire, I'm going to move to Florida. My first question is, why would you do that? Do you love having to worry about hurricanes every year? Because you have to worry about them even when they don't appear. In other words, most people where they live in the world, they don't think about hurricanes because it's not relevant to them. But if you live on the East Coast, it's very relevant, even if one doesn't come up and destroy your neighborhood. You always have to pay attention to whether one is in the works, because it may or may not affect you. So what has happened is global warming extremists. These are not credible people who are legitimately concerned about protecting the environment. I'm talking about people who lie and make stuff up because they have some agenda for whatever reason, or they're just stupid, or they just aren't grounded in science. Al Gore being one of them on some of his claims, not all, but some of them, and just enough to cause a credibility problem where it hurts the very noble effort to try to live in harmony and balance with Mother Nature. The false claim is that global warming is causing a spike in hurricanes. Really? Well, in fact, that claim was made before the spike happened, and it didn't happen. If you don't believe me, just simply do a search on the number of hurricanes that hit the world in the last 20 years. Go back 50, 100 years. What you will see is a pattern that's very interesting, that the number of hurricanes have dropped to a record low. The fact that Mother Nature is not cooperating with Al Gore's psychic predictions is proof that Al Gore is full of you-know-what on some of his claims. Let me give you one other example, which has been in the news recently, and it reminded me of another BS claim that Al Gore made, an outright lie he made up. There were these very disturbing images recently of walruses committing suicide, jumping off of cliffs and killing themselves because of global warming. Yes, the walruses said, damn, it's too hot, I'm going to kill myself. Now, all kidding aside, they're disturbing images. It's disturbing to see suicide committed by any living thing. It's not a feeling that I limit myself to human beings. You know, I had a very good friend of mine, Bill Marriott. I'll be blunt. He killed himself. He called me before he did it. It was very emotionally. I can't even describe it. Anyway, the point is, here are these animals. They're committing suicide. That's not normal. Duh. But why are they doing it? Well, it turns out, just like some animals go off to die, especially males who aren't going to mate anymore, walruses do the same thing. Every year, X number of them kill themselves. And it has nothing to do with the weather. They just do because they're not going to be whatever anymore. Alpha male, whatever you want to call it. I don't know enough about the walrus life form to tell you the chapter and verse on how they work. But I did look at this, and I read some papers, and they basically clearly said that this is just a bunch of nonsense. And it reminded me of what Al Gore had said, which really bothered me when I first heard this claim in Europe. And I remember seeing the footage. Wow, there are polar bears that are being stranded on melting packs of ice in the Arctic because of global warming. That is just heartbreaking. But it turns out it's not true. In fact, I spoke to the photographer who took that photo, that footage. She said that wasn't what was happening. She says, I don't know what was happening. It's just normal nature. Well, polar bears are awesome swimmers. They live and play in the water. They are on and off ice packs all the time. And the polar bear population has increased despite whatever global warming is or is not going on. So if there is a cause and effect in the linear direct cause and effect sense that Al Gore and other alarmists are saying, it is not possible for there to be fewer hurricanes if global warming is really happening the way they claim. It is not possible for the polar bear population to increase the way it has because scientists are not putting them all in zoos and breeding them like pandas on farms. So what really is going on? Well, there's an interesting mathematical exercise you can do, and I would encourage you to try this if you bother to use Google the right way. That's a key caveat here. Just simply Google a simple phrase like, can the entire population of the Earth fit inside the state of Texas? And you will find a lot of graphics which show the population of the Earth and how much square miles it would take if everybody lived all in the same area instead of all over the planet. And it turns out that depending on the population density, you know, there are more people who live per square mile in Singapore versus, say, Texas or Paris. You know, it's just the way that these countries pack themselves together. Having been to 27 countries myself, I can promise you that the population density per square mile or kilometer is a lot more, many times more in Asia than it is in the Czech Republic. In the Czech Republic, I could go days without seeing anybody if I went into the wilderness, and that country is very, very small. There's only 10 million people there. You go to India, a country that is the size of the entire European Union. European Union has about 550 million people in it. India has 1.3 billion people. And one of the things that really struck me when I first moved to India is I couldn't go anywhere unless I went to some of the most remote places on the planet near the Pak border or the Hindu Kush Mountains without running into at least somebody somewhere. And to be honest, I found that rather irritating. You know, like, can't I just get away from people just to go experience nature here for at least an hour, 30 minutes? No, not in many places in India. Yet most of India doesn't have people in it. They live along the coast. And of course, they have problems with the waters as well. The monsoons come in. And Indians for thousands of years just can't seem to manage them properly, meaning when you have advanced cities like Chandigarh, designed not by Indians but by the French, a planned city, which is an amazing concept for many Indians. Most cities there are not planned. They're just ad-libbed, and it really shows. Look at Delhi. Huge mess over there. Well, every time the rains come, the streets flood, and you're up to your knees in water, and there's diseases that break out and mosquito-borne viruses, and people die. Happens every year. I have been caught in this at times because as a foreigner, the idea that you wouldn't clean your drains ahead of time of a monsoon season so that you don't have these problems, I just don't understand why they wouldn't do that. But that's what they don't do in India. And then, of course, the politicians step in and they fire somebody for not doing their job, even though they know damn well that they don't do their job and they're not going to. And let me give you a great example of how things got done in India by breaking the law, basically. Now, we must remember that India is the world's largest democracy. It is also the most superstitious country on the planet, which is not good. And it is the world's largest corrupt democracy. Okay? India, China, and Russia are the perennial trio of the most corrupt countries in the world. And unfortunately, a disproportionate amount of the world's population is in India and China. And India is about to pass China in global population. So you'll have about there a little over 3 billion people out of over 7 billion. Again, disproportionately huge numbers of people in Asia. And the way the economies are going, they're the dominant economies. And there's good and bad in that. That's another show. But every city has what are called, potholes, right? The streets break down. They get craters in the roads, bad for tires, bad for cars. Well, in India, it's really bad. I mean, you're lucky to get a paved road in a lot of places, but when you do, then you have to wonder what kind of paving they do. And one of the things they do in India is they design them in such a way that when there's rain, they flood. They don't have this slight arc that goes off to the left and side of the road, forcing the water off to the sides into the drains like they do in Europe. They've had that design for thousands of years. Thank you, Romans. But anyway, so in India, people are mad that the potholes aren't being fixed because the politicians don't care. So how did they manage to get the politicians to pay attention to go fix the potholes? Well, you can thank the penis for that. Okay, what they did is a guy took spray paint and he drew penises around the potholes. I'm not making this up. You can Google this. And they were so offended over this phallic symbol that they immediately put crews out there to fix these potholes. So what happened is they kept doing this and the potholes got fixed. So God bless phallic symbols made with graffiti, spray paint, because it got the Indian politicians to do their jobs. Well, I got another story to share with you that's true, and this happened just today. I was reading an article that attacked the United States, written by the bleeding liberal wanker New York Times. I can only call it that because these guys are out to lunch, some of these reporters. They're so ungrounded in reality that they said that capitalism, well, we'll come back after this commercial break. All right.
It's hard to listen to the news without realizing we're living in volatile, unprecedented times. Yet never has there been such an opportunity to transform the human condition. As old structures fail, where can we find the guidance to co-create a better way? Find Your Path Home is an ever-evolving, leading-edge information, education, and healing resource center designed to support and guide you on your path to unity and enlightenment. Based on sound principles employed by shaman worldwide, we provide techniques that can support you through the current transitions, offering online shamanic classes, international long-distance shamanic healing sessions, complimentary Mission Evolution radio episodes and Stairway to Heaven TV vignettes, seminars, retreats, and much more. All of this can be found on findyourpathhome.com.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me. simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Welcome back to the second segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. All right. Again, I said we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. I admit I wasn't thinking of another P word there when I said that, but now that we've been talking about it and graffiti and what they did in India to get the bureaucrats to do their jobs, yes, they actually spray painted phallic symbols around potholes. That was so shameful in Indian culture, just outrageous that the politicians actually got off their you-know-whats and started doing their jobs. Well, God bless the man who came up with that idea. Now, let me tell you another interesting thing I found out today. Again, I was starting to talk about this before we had the break here. There was this article in the New York Times. It's making the social media rounds where it basically says that capitalism is essentially the most evil thing in the world, and that we can blame the slavery and plantation founding of the United States of America for the problems we have today. All right, where do we begin to destroy that stupidity? First of all, the United States did not invent slavery. Duh, hello? It didn't. It inherited it, meaning the colonists who later broke away and founded the United States of America, yes, some of them owned slaves, but even at its peak, as I recall from official statistics, the number of slave owners in the colonies in the United States, even after the United States beat Britain, it was the first country to ever defeat the British, was about 1.5% of the population. In fact, I found out in high school that about half the population, even during the American Colonial War of Independence, were not involved in the war and didn't really care who won. Didn't affect them until the outcome one way or another. And we must remember that the so-called American revolutionaries weren't really true revolutionaries initially. What they wanted instead, and King George said no in England, was to have representation in British Parliament because they're paying taxes. They're like, hey, if we're paying you guys something, we should get something for it other than, the right to say Your Majesty. Well, Britain didn't like that attitude. So a war happened. They lost. And the short mechanics of that war is, the Jews loaned a lot of money to the Americans. They then used that money because they had none. Where were they going to get money from? And they bought weapons from the French. And the French were absolutely happy to supply those weapons because they couldn't beat the British. Let the Americans kill the British for them. It's a win-win situation as far as the French were concerned. And that is today why, as part of the symbol of the United States, there's 13 stars in the shape of the Star of David. George Washington was trying to say thank you, Jews. And the Jews were promised that, hey, you can be Jews in this country and no one will kill you. And the Jews thought that was a bargain. So, yeah, here's some money. So that's essentially the short version of how a lot of that happened. And the first, I think, 6 American presidents had British accents, including George Washington. But how many movies about the American founding fathers do you watch on Hollywood where everyone is speaking British or British English? I don't really know of any off the top of my head. Maybe a couple of them, but not the rest of them because, like the British war movies, when the British play Germans, they've got British accents, right? You got to love Hollywood. Anyway, what does this have to do with India and the New York Times and all that stuff? Well, here's why it's relevant. So the New York Times is arguing that because America had slavery, because there was plantations and the brutality of that, and let's be honest, slavery is wrong. It's never going to be right. And yes, things were terrible. Thank God slavery is illegal in the United States. Abraham Lincoln outlawed it, and he was killed as a primary reason for doing that by a racist named John Wilkes Booth, who also was a sore loser when the South lost the war. So what I was surprised to see was some Indian friends of mine, and ranging from close friends to ones I've worked with when I was in different management positions at Daily Post newspaper, including director of HR and so on. And I worked with these people. Some are fellow journalists, and they're all dogpiling on saying, yeah, it's because of slavery. New York Times is right. And I'm like, whoa, wait, really? Seriously? Well, let me remind you guys of your own history, okay? Around the time of the U.S. Civil War, we're talking 1857 now, in India, there was actually an uprising by Indians against the British. And let's be blunt, the British were not nice occupiers. They landed in India as so-called traders, although they were really occupiers, invaders. There were about 10,000 or so British people, military and all the stuff with them. There's about 1 billion Indians. They could easily have destroyed the British, but they didn't. They could have simply drove them back into the sea. But they just couldn't be bothered to do that. Because India, it was every man for themselves back then. And it still is largely today. This is one of India's major problems. Everyone is for themselves unless Pakistan messes with the country. Then all of a sudden everyone's a patriot. It is comical and embarrassing, folks. Laughable. I've seen it firsthand. I've had these conversations with my Indian friends, and I love them, okay? But man, do they not understand why the West is the way it is. And that's why a lot of things in India don't work when they blindly ape the West, because they don't understand why the West is the way it is. So here's what happened. India has all these different kings, maharajas. They have a caste system, which, by the way, is slavery. And as I reminded my loving Indian friends, you still have a caste system today. There's jobs waiting for you depending on your last name. Gee, no racism there, right, folks? The caste system in India is illegal. It's been illegal for a long time, but it's still there. It's still culturally ingrained like other forms of racism and hatred are. So, depending on your last name, that mentality says you can never rise above that. There's a class in India called the untouchables. They're not really untouchable. You can touch them physically. You can punch them in the nose. You can also prosecute them when you don't have corruption. They're humans. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like you and I do. But they're untouchables. Why? Because of racism there. So what happened is, excuse me, in 1857, there was a unified uprising by a couple of Indian cities against the British. It's like, wow, exciting stuff. They're actually going to stand up for their own existence. Hooray! And they can beat the British if they bother. But see, there was a problem here, and it's uniquely Indian. And I'm going to try to explain it to you without laughing, because I have to laugh at this because it is just stupid. There was a brand new weapon back then called the Enfield rifle. You can look it up. And you may remember that the Enfield rifle was a breakthrough in weaponry because it used a different type of bullet and loading mechanism. What you did is you bit off essentially a powder charge. You put it in there. You didn't pour it in there and you have to eyeball it like in the old colonial days, as in the American Revolutionary days. You had to, bite off the top, put it in there, load it up, and fire. You could do it faster. Everything was pre-measured. Well, folks, you know how I feel about superstitions. I don't like them. They're dangerous. I don't think there's anything such as a harmless superstition. And I have this discussion all the time with, I'm sorry, naive types. They say, well, if you believe that breaking a mirror is going to give you 7 years of bad luck, that's not a dangerous superstition. Well, yeah, it is. If you believe that breaking a mirror brings you any kind of luck one way or another, other than maybe you're lucky you didn't cut your hand, okay, that's a different kind of luck. That's a metaphor. It is dangerous to believe in that stupidity, just like it's dangerous to believe that if you throw salt over your left shoulder, you're going to be blessed and you could go win $1 million at a casino. Yeah, right. Well, anyway, what happened in India was Indians finally agreed to do something about their own nation, which didn't exist. There was no India until after the British left India at the end of World War II. So what rifles are they going to use? Because the British employed 10 times as many Indians in their own soldier ranks to kill fellow Indians, because Indians turned against each other. That's how the British ruled India, divide and conquer. They would literally checkerboard the country. Every other prince or maharaj or anybody who wanted to be in power, they'd throw them lots of money in exchange for blind obedience and, screwing over whatever area and taking that territory, all in service of the queen. And, of course, they would be rewarded by getting material possessions and money and things like that. Well, what happened is the grease, the oil that was in this munition was made from animal fat, from pork and beef. Oh boy, you can see where we're going to go with this conversation. So this caused the Indians to freak out. They wouldn't use these weapons because, a cow, beef was used. Fat from a cow, which is holy, was used as lubricant for the weapon and the ammo. And then, of course, the Muslims wouldn't touch it either because some of the oil came from pigs, from pork. So guess what the British did? They slaughtered their opposition because they didn't worry about where the source of fat came from. It worked. Mother Nature invented fat before people existed. They don't care where it comes from. It works. You're dead. And that's one key reason why the Indian Uprising of 1857, while the U.S. is working to get rid of slavery because we're so backwards, Abraham Lincoln
Path Home
was a
Shamanic
retard,
Art
right?
School proudly presents
Well,
the Gathering
I'm
of
sorry.
Shaman 2019 Fall Retreat.
India
Manifestation
couldn't do
Samhain.
anything because
Join
of
me,
stupid
certified
religious
shamanic instructor
superstition
Gwilda
over
Wiyaka in
beef
the
and
magnificent
pork
Colorado Mountains this November
in a
2nd and
weapon with
3rd
an
for a
Enfield
life-changing
rifle,
event.
while America is
Participate
fighting
in
a civil
unique
war for
teachings and
its
ceremonies
soul
that'll put the
to get
power
rid
and
of
magic of
slavery,
shamanic
in
manifestation
part,
into
and
your
the whole
hands.
Southern way of
Sit in
life,
circle with like-minded
which
individuals,
today is
sharing group
epitomized
energy
by
and the power it
racists
generates.
and so on and hatred.
Classes will be held in a
You
facility
can't make
next
this
to the
up.
beautiful,
We'll be back
majestic
after this
Arkansas
commercial
River,
break.
further empowering the experience. Space is limited, so reserve your spot today. For more information, visit findyourpathhome.com or email touchin@findyourpathhome.com.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Corner Radio Show. My name is Kal Korff. I'm your host of this show, of course, and Rob McConnell is the executive producer of this show. All right, we're talking about superstitious beliefs, how they've impacted at least the so-called uprising in India, which ended up being a wash because of religious stupid reasons. That's my view. I think I can defend it with evidence. I'm not aware of many other battles that have been so important where the source of where the oil comes from determines whether or not you bother fighting for your own country or not, for your own freedom. I just don't get it. Anyway, let me give you one other recent example. It has nothing to do with India. This is actually in Israel. And again, you can Google this if you don't believe me or you think I'm some CIA disinfo guy, which is something I hear all the time from UFO conspiracy nuts. Okay, so in Israel, a couple of months ago roughly, there were these protests by ultra-Orthodox, most conservative, stuck-in-time Jews in Israel. And they just won't leave. They keep obstructing traffic and so on. And it's over whether they're allowed to serve in the military or not, because depending on what strain of Judaism you are, Israeli law at present, although it's being modified, and I agree with that, you don't have to be in the military because it would violate your religious principles, while most Jews have to be. And I think it's right that most Jews do serve in the military, both men and women. If they didn't, Israel would not exist today. So I don't have a lot of patience for people who say they don't want to defend their country. Well, if you don't love it and you don't want to defend it, even though you can, then please leave. That's my view. Go live somewhere else where you don't have to be bothered with anything. Anyway, make a long story short, these Jews are protesting, and the police don't want to beat them with clubs and force them and hurt them to quit causing problems. So what are they going to do? Because it's getting to the point where they've got to clear the streets. And these Orthodox Jews know it. And they know that if they get beat, the liberal media, who hates Israel anyway as a rule, will suddenly say, oh, look at these poor guys who are being abused by Netanyahu and whatever. Well, they were able to clear the streets. And here's how they did it. It was just priceless. This was as funny as the beef pork thing in India. But this is the solution, which all right, here's what happened. Basically, some female Israeli women, of course, they know what's going on because they're affected by it. They know how these Orthodox types are. So what they did is they just stood there in front of these Jews. You can actually see this. There's videos of this. And what they did is they flashed them. They flashed their breasts at them. And because it's forbidden to look at a woman's breasts unless it's your wife in the ultra-Orthodox view, you can't even say, hey, nice job, lady. They immediately ran and fled as if you had taken a crucifix and held it up in front of a mythical vampire. And the police are like, why didn't we think of that? So that's how you break up a riot or a protest by ultra-Orthodox Jews. You just flash them your breasts if you're a woman who's not their wife, and they'll just go running away as if the world is ending. It's funny as hell. Excuse the pun. They wear these round things and they dress like they did hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, whatever. And then a pair of breasts, which are as natural as anything else in nature. Mammals have breasts. That's the definition of a mammal. They breastfeed. Hello, they use milk. That just scares the you-know-what out of them because it's evil and sinful, and they just will leave, and they can't look at a woman's breasts if it's not their wife. And most of those guys were single, or they were married, and the women flashing them, there's only a few of them, were not their wives. So they fled because, the horror of looking at someone else's breasts. Who's making a point to show them to you? Oh, God, the world's going to end. So, yeah, that's how they got rid of those protesters. It was just amazing because the police are standing around like just laughing their what's off. Like, wow, I wish we had a breast-flashing anti-riot unit. It would really save a lot of taxpayer money. And talk about the ultimate nonviolent protest. You flash your chest and the other side just leaves in horror. Oh, God, if all conflicts could be settled that way, bring in the flashers. So that's a true story. You can look all this up on the internet, and, yeah, these are true for once. So when you have this kind of stupidity, this kind of fossilized mentality where you're just stuck in time and reality doesn't matter thousands of years later, I'm sorry, it's your problem, okay? So, again, we started this with the hurricanes and Al Gore and all that. We then segued to India, what they did to fix the potholes there, what happened with the Indian Revolution, the New York Times article, now the women flashing their breasts in Israel to, scare or clear the streets, help the police clear the streets. This is the kind of thing that's going on and or has been going on. It's nothing new. The uprising in India was 1857. It's a while back. And then now, of course, people are talking about overpopulation. There's 7.7 billion people and, we need to reduce population because there's too many people. Well, again, and even though I heard this argument from some former teachers of mine whom I respect and far agree with more than I disagree with, and I respect these people enormously, I disagree with that premise because I'll tell you, although I've only been to 27 countries, which, by the way, is 27 more than most Americans will ever see, and most people, in fact, I can tell you from firsthand experience that almost all the problems I've witnessed in my short life in other countries, including the United States, are self-inflicted. And that's why I get really frustrated because I think one of the stupidest things you can do as a living life form is to do things that deliberately cause problems. So I was talking about this with Roy Neal, who I will have on the show in the near future. He's the founder and president of Neal Research Labs. He's a Tony Stark type guy, brilliant inventor. He's also a former roommate of mine when we worked at Apple Claris together. In fact, I got news for you guys, and people like Bob Kiviat and Rob McConnell know this. Those are two people who know me very well. Roy Neal was the guy I practiced the undercover operation against the Meyer cult with when I went there for the first time undercover. I was working with a man named Stan Swihart, who had connections to the government, Bechtel, CIA, etc. And he gave me a complete briefing on what Switzerland was like, what I could expect, etc. He had so much detailed information because he was from Switzerland that my undercover information and everything, it was just like a reconnaissance mission, special ops type thing. I had so much intel data, it really paid off when I was able to later infiltrate the Meyer compound, posing as a believer named Steve Thomas, who I told the Meyer cult and, people like Brunhilde there, real name, folks, that, there's this bastard named Kal Korff who's out to get you. And, he's already written that paper in high school, and I'm American. I can go get him for you. Just give me all the evidence against Korff. I'll go back and nail him for you because I'm an American and I can go get him. Again, they had no idea it was me. They didn't know it was me until the book came out, and they saw my photo there after first lying, denying I was ever there. And then, of course, when I published the photos taken from inside the compound, as well as photos showing me standing there when I was working at Apple Claris on the HyperCard team, they then said, oh, yeah, he was there, and, but the evidence he found was planted by the men in black. Oh, really? Okay. These would be the fake dinosaur photos that Meyer was busted with because I was the first one who got them in Switzerland. Meyer had given them to a friend named Hans Jakob. The Jakob family gave me all those original Meyer photos. I still have them, and I consider them to be worthless because they're hoaxes. Anyway, make a long story short, I'm working with Stan Swihart, and then I want to take models over to Switzerland and go to the same locations Billy Boy did and fake the photos to show people how easy it is to do. Well, how are we going to do it? Well, we lived in the Bay Area. It has hills like Switzerland, although the elevation is lower. Roy worked with me and Steve Horsch, who, of course, he was a prop maker connected to the Star Trek TV series. This is all true. Made these models out of plastic and brought them over and then bought material from the stores Meyer would have shopped in Wetzikon. And we put the models together, floated them up on helium balloons. You can only get helium from one source. It's all imported in the country from Pangas in Zurich, Pangas. And we were able to replicate Meyer's photos and prove it was a hoax. But Roy Neal was the one who worked with me to go up in the hills of the Bay Area to test the models and the theory first, because we were trying to figure out how Meyer faked his photos by analyzing the photos. And we could see balloons in the background. They're very clear. Even in the Genesis 3, Wendell Stevens enlargements that I had received from Wendell Stevens in the Genesis bunch, because Wendell and I were friends back then before the Meyer case came between us. And we could see the balloons in the background. And that gave us the first insights into how Meyer faked his imagery. So Roy Neal and I go way back, and we were talking about overpopulation, and he basically pointed out a fact that if you took everybody in the world, over 7 billion people, you could fit them all in the sizes of the state of Texas. That's a fact. You can do the math. How much space between each person you give them to live, square feet, is a different issue. Try Googling population of the earth fitting in the state of Texas. You will see different maps that say if the population density were crammed in like Singapore, it would take up this much space. For Paris, it would take up this much space. Obviously, people in America have more space between them depending on where they live versus, say, Singapore or India, where there's a lot more people crammed per square kilometer than there is, say, in Montana. Okay. So, again, it's an interesting statistical exercise. So I pointed out to some people that the problem isn't human population. It's making a point to do the wrong things is the problem. You can have one guy, if he blows up a nuke in downtown city, you've ruined the neighborhood. Okay, it's one guy acting bad. And what I've seen in my travels is all the problems, especially in countries like India. This is the reason I have a love-hate relationship with India. They're self-inflicted. And we'll come back to that after the commercial break. I'll give you some real examples. But the problem isn't the number of people. It's the fact that we have bad governments. Okay? We'll be back after this commercial.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie, natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide. They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Eli Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now to receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Kal's Corner Radio Show on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Once again, my name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. So we've been talking about a lot of different subjects on this show here. We were talking about overpopulation before the commercial break and bad government. You know, you hear people say, oh, people are flooding into the United States because of bad economies elsewhere in those countries. That's true. People try to survive and better themselves. At least most people do, or at least most people I know do. I also know people who just can't be bothered. Whatever. None of those are close friends of mine, by the way. Anyway, so yeah, people from Latin America are flooding into the United States. They've been doing it for many years, because things tend to be better in the United States, and we have a immigration policy which is a joke. We don't have a secure border. And while you may wrongly think that I'm starting to sound like Donald Trump, I don't support Trump, although I can't argue with some of the principles he talks about. I just have higher standards as a leader. I want somebody who's not so tainted. Anyway, the point is, of course they come to the U.S. for better life. You can't fault them for that. But why are their countries so bad? Well, let's be blunt. The United States has never cared about any Latin American countries unless they became communist. Now, this is a Cold War mentality thing, and I understand that. They didn't want Russia, advancing via the communist domino theory, bringing communism up to the American border. I understand that. It's logical. The furthest that Russia got was Fidel Castro, and it didn't really work out well. They lost the Cuban Missile Crisis. So now look at Latin America. Would anybody hold up any Latin American country as a wonderful example of how to run a nation? The answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not, unless you are delusional or insane or don't care about people. Do you think Mexico is a shining example of a wonderfully run country? No. They've got record numbers of murders every year. They keep outdoing themselves in that department. Venezuela, go socialism, right? Well, look where they are today. They are doing cannibalism down there. I'm not making that up. And if you don't think that Venezuela is a shining example of socialism done the way that hardcore socialists want to do it, then go move there or just stay there for 14 days. That's all I ask. Get yourself a round-trip ticket. Just stay there for 2 weeks, and then we'll talk. Look at Cuba. What hole that is. It's never going to get better, folks. It doesn't matter what the communist government does. It doesn't matter whether the last name is Castro. It ain't going to work. Never going to happen. You're wasting electrons. You're wasting your life, your existence. But that happens. Look at countries like Puerto Rico. The government resigned because of corruption. They misused billions of dollars in aid. Gee, where's the surprise in that? The Palestinian National Authority, they're happy that somebody's given them money because the U.S. has cut off all their money, as they should. Because Abbas, who's in, the 13th year of his original 4-year term in office, he has billions stashed away in Swiss bank accounts, in offshore bank accounts. He was Arafat's money bagman for years. That's why he took over when Arafat died. And Arafat, when he died, there were billions that were found after he died because he cared about the Palestinian people. No. Most countries on this planet, folks, are not run properly. So yeah, blame human overpopulation for that. Don't blame the leaders who screw over the people. Don't blame the dictators who commit mass murders. They're innocent, right? And don't blame the people in some few democracies that vote in the wrong morons to represent them, and then they wonder why things didn't work out. Gee, are they that stupid? The answer is yes. And I hold up my own country, the United States of America, as a perfect example of this. Most Americans now are tired of the creaky, broken two-party system. It is epitomized by two words, Democrats and Republicans. Most Americans want a viable third-party alternative. Even if it's not a party, but it's an individual who will do what they want done. But yet they don't seem to get off their ass to vote for the right individual or person who would do what they want to get done. They just don't go there. That light doesn't go on. It's now starting to go on saying, this isn't working. That's a first key step. But we need to do more. It's not enough to say it isn't working. Because then what's the rest of your sentence? What is the solution? Because unless you focus on the solution, you are being part of the problem. You're holding progress back. So what's going on now? Well, you have an election coming up. Look at the Democratic Party. Joe Biden is the front runner, right? I'm sorry, folks. He's really not going to last much longer. He's a joke. Not only that, there are other Democratic candidates like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. They're considered to be more left or extreme than Biden. Biden is part of the good old boy network, okay? If Barack Obama hadn't thrown him a lifeline by making him VP, and he did it only to make sure he had a pliant guy he didn't have to worry about his back, Biden would be history. Nobody would even think about him because he was a joke. Sorry. And what great contributions did he make as vice president? Do you know that in 2008, the very year he became vice president, the medical doctors found that he had an irregular heartbeat? And you're going to make this person one seat away from the presidency, and he has a bad heart? Well, Dick Cheney had a bad heart too, but at least he was kept alive by technologies. Had what, 2 or 3 heart transplants now? He was vice president, one heartbeat away, literally, from the presidency, no pun intended. But at least Dick Cheney was an experienced politician, way more than Biden, although you may disagree with his Cold War mentality. But again, what kind of president appoints a successor, should he die, who has a bum heart? Oh, God, that's such a vision for the greatness and safety and security of the future of the United States, should the unthinkable happen, isn't it, folks? Yeah, and all these years later now, it's been, almost 10 years later, here's Biden. His heart has not gotten better. In fact, he can't even talk for 2 minutes without making a fool out of himself. He's not going to survive a debate against someone like Trump. Trump doesn't even have to have a good night at a debate to win. He proved that against Hillary. So what is America doing? Well, it's spinning in circles. It's getting worse. It's not getting better. Because the idea that these two political parties who have caused all the major problems in the U.S., they're self-inflicted, just like Lincoln said. He said famously that America will never be conquered or destroyed from the outside. Instead, he worried that it would rot and implode from the inside when it lost its moral compass. And Lincoln was right. And young people can't even tell me anything about Lincoln. I've asked. It's pathetic. And yet they all got Common Core now. Well, what are they learning? Nothing. And because Lincoln isn't sending memes, whatever you want to call them, on Facebook, they don't care about him. He dresses funny. I've heard these stupid comments. Even Thanksgiving isn't politically correct anymore. Okay, I know the Pilgrims weren't nice guys. They were religious extremists. They were so radical the King of England kicked them out. That takes special talent. Yeah, they didn't do nice things to the Indians. They brought diseases. But, the idea that you could sit down with somebody, share a meal, have peace, talk, That's good stuff. It doesn't matter what races and religions or people are involved. It's peace. And this is the core message here, peace. I'm not talking about the kind of peace where you just roll over and let some tyrant wipe out a village because you're so anti-gun you wouldn't even defend your wife. I'm not talking about that kind of extremism. I'm talking about peace where you view another human being as a human being. You will agree to disagree, and that's okay. You may not even believe in a God or the same God. But who are you to judge whether you're right or them? Because are you God? No. And why do they believe in what they believe? A lot of people don't ask that. I've asked many Muslims, why are you a Muslim? And the one thing they say without saying it is, because I was born that way, raised that way. Well, that's a key difference. And yet when I ask the average Indian, are you really a hardcore Sikh? Are you really a hardcore Hindu? The young people are saying, no, I don't want to wear that turban in the hot weather. I don't want to have a beard that I can never shave. And yeah, I like a good steak. So that's what's going on now. India is the world's largest exporter of beef for slaughter. There's actually beef tourism industries in Asia. A lot of Indians go to Vietnam to have beef so they don't spend 7 years in prison because they can't do the same thing in India. That's how ridiculous it is. You have underground beef eating clubs like you used to have underground, bars during Prohibition in the U.S. because in India, in most states, 23 out of 29, it's a prison sentence if you eat beef. If you want to get someone killed, start a rumor. He's eating beef. They'll go kill you. I'm not making this up. You can look at it. So the problem is mismanagement, extremism. When everybody lives in a city and you've urbanized something, that's not the way to do things. So I don't know how many people the earth can handle, but the reason it's having problems now is because of people, not the earth. That's a fact. So anything else is just nonsense, I'm sorry. Deal with things right and things work. We'll be back next week for another show. Thanks again for joining me.
How would your life change if you could develop the business and personal skills that you need in order to make more money? Do you want to learn how to achieve your big life goals faster? Then go to findhiddenmoney.com and get the Goal for It online course. The course teaches you how you can set and achieve your biggest goals while completely overcoming the roadblocks to your goals so that you can realize your dreams and imagine more success. Go to findhiddenmoney.com.
Memorable dynamic presentations are a not-so-secret weapon in the business world. Do you have a powerful message that must be shared, but you haven't found a way to deliver that message? Do you want to be known as a top public speaker who gets amazing results? Are you ready to create and deliver your powerful message? Thomas Hides can help you create and deliver your speech to get the results you desire. Visit iconquality.com.
Did you expect your business to flourish, but instead it plateaued or didn't get off the ground yet? Would you like to achieve massive goals and discover new sources of income within your business? When you're ready to experience that type of success with fast results, Cindy Hendricks is the business coach for you. Her work with entrepreneurs and business owners has been life-changing. To get you and your business where you want to be, go to imaginemoresuccess.com.
Has the fear of public speaking stalled your business or personal life? What would you give to develop and maintain supreme confidence? Have an invaluable private program to always perform at your best. Imagine how you would feel. You can have all that and so much more today with Thomas Hides' life-changing course called Number One Fear Unleashed. Visit numberonefear.com and be liberated from your fear of public speaking.